So, hi, I'm Metta Spencer, and today we're going to talk to you vegans, okay? At least that's what I think is going to happen. I have not met Jenny Harris until now, but Jenny Harris is I guess you'd say, a farmer in Georgia. Is that right? Is that the way you would describe yourself? And you have an extraordinary farm called White Oaks Farm. Is that right?
White Oak Pastures.
Pastures. All right. That's even better because it does describe what we're aiming at today. As I understand it, you have actually demonstrated, what we hear is if you really want to be a good global citizen, you want to eat less meat or no meat. And of course, there are a lot of people in the world who get along fine without eating meat, but I do eat meat. And you may say that I'm biased because I like meat. But I think there's good evidence that this advice of stopping meat eating may be problematic. It may not be what really is the best solution. So Jenny Harris her family owns an extraordinary operation in Georgia, meaning the state in the U.S. and not the country. I have many friends in the country of Georgia, so probably have more shows with Georgians in Tbilisi than I do with, where's your farm? What town are you near?
Southwest Georgia, so almost Alabama, almost Florida, and a small town named Bluffton.
All right. Okay. Well, anyway, let's get right down to it. I want to hear what there is that you have demonstrated and how you run your farm. That is something that everybody should take into account, or at least some of us should think about.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I'll start off by saying thank you for having me. We appreciate any opportunity that we get to talk about what we do at White Oak Pastures. So my name is Jenny Harris, and I'm the 5th generation of the farm, along with my younger sister, Jody. And we pasture raise and hand butcher 10 species of livestock on the farm. So we raise cattle, goats, sheep, rabbits, and hogs, chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, and guineas. Those are the 10 species that we raise.
Oh.
And we process them in our own on-farm USDA inspected processing plants, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. And then we sell that meat to consumers who care a lot about animal welfare, land regeneration, and the rural revival of Bluffton, Georgia, or towns like Bluffton, Georgia. So the evolution of the farm was that I'm part of the 5th generation. So my great-great-grandfather came to Bluffton after the Civil War and started on his uncle's land, who was a medical doctor in town. And that was about 1,000 acres of land. And he farmed a lot like we do today, in that if he wanted to eat it, wear it, or smoke it, he grew it. And that system worked because that was how farms operated almost identically up to the end of World War II. It was after World War II that agriculture and really industries changed incredibly. So my grandfather, who was born in 1920, he was the 3rd generation of the farm. He really changed the way our farm operated. He used chemical fertilizer, pesticides, insecticides. We started confinement feeding the cattle grains to fatten them up so that we could make more money when we sold them to the stockyards in the West on a per pound basis. And we got away from that polycultural, multi-species production system that my great-great-grandfather saw so much value in.
It was your grandfather who made this switch, right?
That's right. And it was because it was under his reign that agriculture really changed. He was born in 1920, which means at the end of World War II, he would have been a young adult, looking to make his own impact on the farm. And so it continued to operate in that industrial commodity manner up until about the mid-90s. My father, who's the fourth generation of the farm, was born in 1954, and his dad they had a really hard working relationship. They loved each other and they could do everything together, fish and hunt and whatever, but they could not work together. So my dad moved off the farm and got a real job, which he continued through the mid-90s. In the mid-90s, my granddad fell ill to dementia and was not able to run the farm. So it did give my dad an opportunity to come home. In coming home, Dad realized that he really wanted to do something different, something that his father had not done, because he was disgusted with the excesses of the commodity market. The copious quantities of grain, the confinement feeding, the monocultural production system, all of those things were not sources of pride for him as they had been in his 20s and 30s.
Well, excuse me, but also I wonder whether at that point there were financial, that he could see that it wasn't working too well, or whether it seemed to be working well, but he still thought it was not the right way to do things.
So we were not rich people during that time, but we were raised comfortably. We made money every year. We paid taxes every year. So it was a profitable business growing beef cattle for the commodity market. So the change was not, there was no financial incentive. In fact, we didn't owe any money. We had never borrowed any money. If my parents paid cash for vehicles, we were blessed in the sense that the farm gave us additional income to live very comfortably. And so changing that in the mid-90s was very hard. We took on a lot of financial debt, which we continue to have today. So there was no writing on the wall that was, hey, do this and you'll be wildly profitable and yada yada yada. That was not part of the swap. The swap was really being disgusted with how things were going. Breaking agriculture into individual silos so that production is so far removed from processing, and processing is so far removed from sales, and the many steps that it took to get a cow to the customer who bought beef. It's all that gray area that just was really, Dad thought it was not the right thing to do. So he started making incremental swaps in the 90s, which started with ceasing the use of chemical fertilizer on the land. He later gave up growth hormones and steroids on the cattle, and then later gave up confinement feeding, grain finishing with the livestock. So we continued that and learned more about grass-fed beef and consumers who care about animal welfare. And in the early 2000s, he sought out a processor. Consumers don't buy cattle, they buy beef. So we had to take our raw material, which was cattle, and turn it into steaks and roast and ground beef, which he was lucky to find processing off the farm in a small town named Tifton, Georgia. And that worked well for us. But it didn't work for growth. We took their extra capacity, where they weren't able to do more and more for us. So in 2007, Dad made the decision to build processing on the farm and made our farm, I think, one of only two at that time farms in the United States that had processing on the farm, which is just so crazy for me to think about. I obviously don't remember, the late 1800s where we processed a pig and a few chickens and maybe a cow and didn't have refrigeration or combustible engines, and loaded it up in a horse-drawn wagon and pedaled it, up and down these streets in Bluffton, Georgia. I don't remember those towns, but I'd also been a consumer of beef and never focused on the fact that there were very few farms. In fact, only one other farm that was raising livestock and slaughtering all on that same farm. That was just
but
not.
Now, in the earlier period, that was standard procedure, right? Because
Absolutely.
I remember my parents slaughtering. I remember particularly a calf, because I remember they were going to do it, and I was hanging on to a pole, thinking, I'm going to force myself to stay here and watch this. As I bet that my father looked around and thought that I would flee, but I didn't. And he said, "You get out of here." So I never actually saw it happen. But my grandparents had something called a smokehouse.
Yes, and most families did in that era.
I remember playing in the smokehouse, and I never saw it used. Because I gathered they'd stopped that by then. But so this was the pattern until about what period?
I would say that that really, after World War II is when that kind of stopped. The house that I live in was where my grandfather was raised. He was born in 1920, and about 8 years ago, the old smokehouse in my backyard fell in. So, even the house that I never saw it used either, but even the house that I live in had a smokehouse. It was built in 1900. So I know that they were using them at least up until then. My grandfather used to tell stories about hiding in the smokehouse. So I know it was used in the 1930s when he was, a young man, like you, playing around. So
what would they have been doing? Did they build? I never knew what they did in the smokehouse. They hung pieces of meat and then made a fire in there.
That's right. It was early preservation. It was salted meats, hams, curing. That I wish I could say more. Like you, I've never seen one used, but from what I understand, it was the preservation of large game meats so that they could be consumed long after what the shelf life of that would have been.
Okay.
But let's see, the building of processing on the farm really changed the way we operated. We were lucky enough to find customers like Publix, supermarkets, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with. It's a southeastern grocery chain, Whole Foods market. Back in the early 2000s. In fact, our farm sold Whole Foods and Publix the first pound of grass-fed beef to be marketed as grass-fed beef in the United States. So we were just real early innovators in that vertically integrated food production system where livestock is raised, livestock is slaughtered, livestock is fabricated, and then livestock or meat is shipped to those grocery chains. And so
Whole Foods, you're talking about the outfit that now, is it Google that owns it, or
Amazon
owns it? Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yes.
All right. So in Colorado, I think they must be all over the place now, huh?
I would imagine so. Yes, ma'am. But the benefit of working with those grocery stores is that it really gave us some volume purchase orders to produce to. We were able to ramp up the processing, not seamlessly, because it was a very painful process, but at least we had the demand there to fill. And so that's what we've been doing ever since. We've integrated other species, like I mentioned, the additional 9 species that we talked about earlier in our conversation. We've created some value addition through our pickling and our canning and our jellying and jamming. We've created some experience-based programs, which is I'm speaking at this is the name tag for the program. It's a beef bone with. Yeah, so this is a beef rib bone with my name in it.
What's this? You put it on the desk in front of you when you're sitting? Is that it?
I'm actually wearing it because I'm a speaker at this conference that we're hosting. So this is my get out of jail free card. I get to eat for free and whatever else. But we've been blessed with interest, so we've put in some overnight lodging accommodations on the farm, a restaurant, a general store, and a few other things that help us sell and educate on the production system that we enjoy.
Now, just say you mentioned jams and pickles or something. That means you produce vegetable products as well as animal products, right?
We do. We've got a 2-acre certified organic vegetable farm, and they grow, whatever you can grow here in the South: collards, kale, cabbage, carrots. In the summer, it's lots of squash and zucchini and okra. So we use our own farm commissary to then pickle and preserve whatever items we can't sell fresh through our restaurant or general store.
And you have a restaurant there too?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Wow, you're really into it. Let me back up a little bit, because you were telling me back there all the different technological opposition that your father had to various things. And I wonder whether your grandfather or anybody else had been using antibiotics to fatten animals, because that's kind of an issue for me. I've become aware of the fact that has some real hazards to it.
Well, and just a note on that, antibiotics are used in commodity systems not to make them fat, but to keep them from dying. We put these animals in what's called a CAFO, CAFO. The C stands for confined, A stands for animal, F stands for feeding, O stands for operation. So a confined animal feeding operation, where they're not allowed to express their instinctive behavior. Instead of, for example, cattle are their instinctive behavior is to roam and graze. Well, in a confinement operation, a CAFO, those cattle are tightly confined into a very small space where they are delivered grains and other feedstuffs that make them get fat really quickly. Mm-hmm. So in order for those animals to not get sick, they have to be treated with subtherapeutic antibiotics. Those subtherapeutic antibiotics are likely one of the only reasons that those animals can live in those unnatural conditions. And so the negatives that we see from overusing antibiotics in our livestock production systems are these antibiotic resistancies that we see, where medicines are no longer effective. So you're right. Antibiotics are one of the tools that science has given us to make meat production cheap and easy. And due to the mismanagement of that tool, we now see lots of negative effects where medicines are no longer as effective as they have been.
Well, there's another disadvantage that I didn't know of until I interviewed another person on this talk show who is a specialist in the effects of antibiotics. And apparently they were surprised originally, I think during number of years ago, to find that it did tend to fatten animals. I don't think they ever figured out why it would fatten them, but they did to some extent. But the other thing is that when the animals excrete the antibiotics, and then you've got this manure which goes someplace, however it's used, it can destroy the natural bacteria in the soil that we require, or that is just healthy for soil. So the effect is not only antibiotic resistance for human patients in hospitals who need antibiotics, but also that we're ruining our own soil with sprinkling this stuff around.
Yeah, I agree completely. Rarely is there ever only one negative consequence. It's, if I made the decision to skip class, the first negative consequence would be that my teacher would give me a tardy, X on my progress report, but there are likely additional unintended consequences, like I might fail my test. And if I fail my test, I'm not going to get into nursing school. And if I don't get into nursing school, then I'm going to be a bum and whatever, there are lots of negative things that happen because of misusing tools. Again, life occurs in balance, and when there's imbalance, there are negative things that happen, and these tools are not being used in a balanced way, which means that we don't even know what all the negative effects are. We think that we're just so smart, and that we can mitigate this negative effects with this and mitigate this negative effect with this. We have no idea what we're doing. We should have learned that a long time ago.
Right. Okay. Good. I just did, I tend to interrupt people who go off on angles that interest me. So I interrupted you. Okay. So you've now got this big operation. At least it sounds amazing to me. But here along comes climate change, and you've got some new enemies. If I can anticipate where this discourse was going. Not only are you worried about how to take care of animals and make their lives a little bit more comfortable before they're slaughtered, but you've got to think about the effects of the fact that beef cattle burp.
That's correct. Yeah. So lots of points there. Cattle have emissions through belching and flatulating, and that's true with our cattle, as it is true with the opposite end of the spectrum, which are animals raised in confinement operations, like we just got done talking about. We believe that animal impact can heal soil, that the world evolved with predators chasing prey across prairies, and those animals impacted those prairies with disturbance, which increased, water penetration, fertility. They fed the microbes in the soil with their defecation and urination. They had lots of benefits, and that was a very natural production system. The earth evolved with livestock. We agree on that, right?
Absolutely.
And so when we're faced with these conversations about eliminating meat from people's diets, sometimes the argument, is, well, I can't stand the thought of eating a living animal, which I completely respect. Everybody has a threshold of what is and is not acceptable to them. And, I personally respect someone's choice to not eat meat because it was once a living thing. I don't necessarily have that same, feeling, but I respect that feeling. And I think that if that's someone's motivation to eliminate meat, they certainly deserve that. There are others that say it makes me sick. Every time I eat red meat, I get sick to my stomach. It makes me nauseated. I've heard that before. I'm a vegetarian because I can't stand the way it tastes, or it feels in my mouth, or it, makes me ill. And I understand that too. I also don't have that problem. I think meat is delicious, but I respect that person's choice to also be a vegetarian or vegan. Mm-hmm. But then there's a third argument. And the third argument is, I don't eat meat because cows are ruining the planet. Mm-hmm. And I really philosophically can't align with that. In my opinion, this earth evolved from a brown, black rock to a planet teeming with life due to the success of the cycles of nature, the water cycle, the energy cycle, the mineral cycle, the grazing cycle. And I think that livestock they're at the center of those cycles of nature. I believe that livestock is what sets up those cycles of nature to work together in symbiosis to create life. I think that's part of the story of how we all got here. That's part of the story of how this earth evolved from a flaming hot rock on one side to a frozen ice cold block on the other, to a planet that is green and blue and beautiful, teeming with life.
Okay, I don't want to disagree with you, because I do agree with you, but also there is a point to be made that overgrazing can have deleterious effects. So you find people, in many parts of the world, there's desertification going on, drying up of land that used to be greener than it is now, and the explanation that's often offered and sometimes maybe true is they are grazing cattle more than the land, or they're not doing it right, or something.
Agree completely. Part of, it's sort of like nothing's white and black, right? Everything's gray, everything's situational. We could say that cars are dangerous and nobody should have a car. Well, that's not exactly true. There are responsible people who know how to operate an automobile that are perfectly capable of driving and being safe while doing it. But there are also some really stupid people who should never be able to get behind the steering wheel of a car, right?
Fair enough.
So the desertification and the overgrazing is equally as big of a part of the conversation. A friend of ours named Diana Rogers coined the term, it's not the cow, it's the how. So what these people that say that cattle are ruining the planet, they're grouping in all cattle production into one production system, which is the CAFO commodity industrial model. Not everybody participates in the commodity industrial model. There are some of us who rotate cattle every day. We move during the growing season. Our I would guess maybe 13 or 1400 cow brood herd moves from one paddock to the next. And there is no overgrazing. There are no ruined creek beds. There is no desertification. In fact, it's the opposite. We have been blessed to purchase degraded commodity cropland, so land that was historically farmed in cotton, corn, and peanuts. And we've transitioned that land due to animal impact from degraded soil that could not support anything. It was a dead mineral medium, no active biome there in that soil, no bacterias. It was a sterile environment due to chemical fertilizer, pesticides, and insecticides. And we've turned it into pastures that grow grass that's teeming with life. And evidence of that is the life cycle assessment that you can find on our website, which was done by Qantas, a environmental third-party consulting firm out of Minnesota, and they measured core samples of land that's been managed with our production system. We call that holistic land management. So land that's been managed holistically for 0 years, land that we had just purchased, for 5 years, so land that had had cattle on it or multiple species on it for 5 years, land that had been under holistic management for 10 years and for 20 years. I think it was a 20-year study. And the carbon in the soil is a steady line of increase for the amount of time that it's been managed holistically. Beautiful. So to those people who believe that they are not eating meat for environmental reasons, I would challenge them to come here and look. If they did enough research on the production systems that grow the peas and soy and whatever else that are going into their plant-based protein, they would quickly find that it's a monocultural crop production system where copious quantities of chemical fertilizer, pesticides, and insecticides are being used, versus our system, which is completely natural. There are no inputs. It's literally sunlight and rain and using livestock to repair those pieces of land. And I would challenge them to make that call then. Which one seems more natural to you?
Mm-hmm. Well, quite apart from the natural thing, when we talk about mitigating climate change or actually sequestering carbon that needs to be pulled out of the existing ambient atmosphere and put someplace, one of the big promises is that we can put more and more of the carbon out of this atmosphere into the soil. I don't know how much of it will be absorbed. Some people say there's a finite amount that the soil can accept until it's saturated, but I don't think we're anywhere near that amount for most.
Let's try to find that limit.
Yeah, that's right. Very interesting. But then if you can, and one of the things that I think France did a few years ago was to develop a program called 4 per thousand. In other words, not 4%, but 4 per thousand is a goal for how much, if everybody in the world all the farmers were sequestering 4 per thousand of carbon, that's the quantity you want, we would handle a large proportion of our, I don't remember the numbers, but a really worthwhile percentage of the carbon problem that we're having by putting it in the soil. So but people say, well, how that you can't do it, or you can't do it enough. And I've heard that you guys are doing it.
We are. You can take note of it at 60 miles an hour driving by the farm when you compare the color of our soil versus the color of our neighbors. Two completely different production systems. One very commodity, cotton, corn, peanuts, very intensive rotational crop system versus ours, which is grass growing and pastures for livestock. And there'll always be naysayers, and those people can't be convinced. I'm not trying to have conversations with those folks. They've made up their mind a long time ago. My granddad said, "Baby, if everything, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail." And I get that a lot when I talk to some people. And so, if all people has as a hammer, I don't know how to convince them, but I truly believe that those people who want to understand food production systems can be shown in a very short amount of time with a very elementary explanation, because the differences are just so incredibly stark.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the question is, do you happen to just have a nice piece of land where good things happen, or are you onto something that can be taught to anybody anywhere, or if maybe not everybody everywhere, at least some people in many other places? How transferable is the information and the knowledge that you are acquiring with White Oaks Pastures?
So we get that question a lot. And the truth is, this is a very complex system. There's complicated, you can have an instruction manual. My son got a bunch of stuff that had to be put together on Christmas Eve, and that was complicated. There's an instruction manual in step 1, 2, 3 through 742. That is complicated. And then there's complex. Complex is a system. Your body is complex. If you're you're overcompensating and undercompensating. If one thing happens, the others morph and adjust to absorb that disturbance. That is complex. And so for regenerative farming, it is complex. It is not complicated. Nobody can give anyone a how-to manual, because how we did it is so different than how someone else might do it. Our climate is different. The land is different. Our knowledge and skill and experience is different. But what we do say is that what we did in Bluffton is very replicatable. It's not very scalable. We don't want to reinvent the mega food production systems that exist today. We believe that there should be lots of smaller food production systems like ours. And so, it's very replicatable, but it's not very scalable. And so, the session that made me late today, it's called the Center for Agricultural Resilience. And it's to do exactly what this question asked. It's to educate people on how to rethink agriculture so that they can incorporate it in their own ecosystems. So, we believe that, and this farm's not the only one doing this type of work. Unfortunately, we're one of a few. There's not very many of us. But there are others who are farming a lot like we do here in Bluffton that have also figured it out in their own context. If you visit their farms, they don't look exactly like white oak pastures, but that's perfect. That they look like what their ecoregion needs. Mm-hmm. So the short answer is yes, it can absolutely be taught, but not verbatim word for word.
I think that my impression is, and maybe I'm mistaken, but my impression is that this thing called regenerative farming and regenerative grazing is a trend that's actually gaining strength now, that people are listening, farmers in many parts of the world are listening to, I say to you, but also I'm aware that where you got some of this material is from Alan Savory, right?
Of course.
We have to be very impressed with his intuitive grasp of what he sees when he, not everybody can observe as carefully as he has. But I on Facebook, I joined several different social groups called regenerative farming or regenerative grazing. And there seem to be people all over the world sharing ideas about, here's this new weed that I've got to deal with, and tell me what it is, and can somebody help me decide what to do with it, and so on. So they're sharing ideas that it seems to me this is catching on. Am I wrong?
So. I hope so, because I truly believe that our planet depends on it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, good. What do you say to people who say, well, it's just consuming too much of the world's resources to have people devote land to raising cattle rather than grains or something that human beings could eat, and you could produce a lot more calories per acre if you didn't try to produce meat, but rather vegetable products?
Yeah, there's a really good study that I literally heard about yesterday, and I wish I had retained it a little better. You can produce more pounds of product, more pounds of grain per acre if you took that same acre of land and raised peas for plant-based protein versus cattle for beef. But if you break it down into calories per acre, animal agriculture wins. Animal agriculture produces more calories per acre than any grain production. And it's not by a little bit, it's by a lot. I'll see if I can't find it and send it to you afterwards, if you've got any show notes or something that you can put those in. Yes, land is a limiting factor. There's only so much land. But when you compare these two systems, you have to really understand that at some point the earth can't, there's a finite carrying capacity on planet Earth. We can't just keep on having populations grow exponentially and expect for the land base to take care of all those people. So, at the end of the day, there is indeed a finite carrying capacity for planet Earth. We don't know what it is, but there is one. While the regenerative system might take more land, the commodity system takes more fossil fuels, more water, more inputs like antibiotics. There are lots of, that's like having the argument with only one facet being a limiting factor. I don't know if we're going to run out of land first, or clean water, or fossil fuels. What do we think we're going to run out of first? That's that's part of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense to me. By the way, you mentioned Diana Rogers. I think she wrote a book called Sacred Cow.
She sure did.
And I was really impressed with that book. I've been tried to get her to be on my talk show, but she never was. You go lobby her for me.
I'll mention it to her the next time I talk to her.
It was a great book. And also I think somebody else that I talked to who's doing regenerative and regrazing in Canada said that something interesting I hadn't heard before, which was that because meat is such a nutrient dense food, that in fact the amount of work it takes to produce vegetable products has always originally, was been more than people could afford. In other words, you had to have meat in order to have the kind of energy that you really needed to produce stuff. The people who, and this fits with something I read I'm a retired sociology professor, and I know a little bit about anthropology. And one of the things the archaeologists find is that when they look at countries or what were societies that switched from hunting and gathering to agricultural societies, and there are bones and relics of places that have done that. Apparently, the life expectancy of that society in almost every case, or maybe in every case, drops considerably, like 10 years or several years, because agriculture is a lot more harder to do, and you don't get the nutrients for your effort that you would get by hunting. And so actually people were healthier when they lived and could afford to get along with just hunting and gathering rather than agriculture. And people didn't like to become farmers. They did it when they had to because the population got too big or something like that. So some countries, many societies made the transition, but it was at a real cost that life expectancy would always drop when you made that transition. I find that really disturbing, but relevant to the kinds of considerations we have to bear in mind today.
I agree completely. I mean, without question, we're less healthy, at least, us as a culture in the United States, less healthy than we've ever been. And there have been huge modern advances in, technology and medicine and whatever else. But you can't deny that people are simply less healthy today than they were years and years ago. And so, our previous generations had it all over us, and we could speculate as to why that is. But, things are not going really well for us. Maybe some of the things that we've come so far with, we probably haven't really made much progress. We probably hurt ourselves a lot more than helped.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't know whether you say you can't deny, but I expect most people would deny that because life expectancy has increased. But I wonder if if that's a reflection of general healthiness or not. I'm not sure. You have you say you can't deny it. I would love to hear what basis you have for saying that we are less healthy than our grandparents.
Look at the amount of medicines that most of us consume on a daily basis for things that we did not have to take medicines for in prior generations. I don't take any medicines on a daily basis. I'm blessed to be in the prime of my life in great health. And I think some medicines are necessary. There are people with conditions that, some medicines need to be taken every day. But I think that, as a population, we're likely overprescribed and under-exercised. And while it might increase the quantity of our years, the quality of our years is not there. So this is my opinion, but I don't necessarily believe that we are healthier today than we were during my grandmother's generation.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. So now you're giving courses. Tell me about you. You have a program that you say is going on today. Tell me about the kinds of outreach that you're doing to try to change public opinion or change. This is something that I do all the time. I'm trying to, you say you don't argue with people. Well, I tend to argue a lot. I don't always win, but I try. And tell me what you are doing in terms of educating the general population about your approaches and how that's going.
So we formed the Center for Agricultural Resilience in the fall of last year. It now has its own page on our website where people can apply to attend a session. We have about 6 sessions a year, one every other month. We're experiencing our 3rd session. It's 4 days long, and it's an immersive experience in Bluffton, Georgia. The things we talk about, we sort of start with some pretty big frameworks comparing linear and cyclical agriculture. So linear being very input intensive to create some output, cyclical being like the cycles of nature. We then move into some specifics of soil science, because we believe that the soil is really the true indicator of a system and how the health at which it is or is not. And then the 3rd day is pretty much spent talking through the evolution of white oak pastures and how we sort of created a vertically integrated food system in Bluffton. So it is, again, it's 4 days long. It's a big investment of time, but we believe that, in order to rethink the food system, it takes a lot of someone's focus.
Mm-hmm. How many people have come to this thing that you're doing? Are these farmers themselves, or are they just, who are the people?
The people, so we've had about 15 people per session, and this is our 3rd session. So, 45 people have currently gone through this 4-day course. And the people span from bankers and financiers to insurance adjusters to politicians and their staffers to, Delta, the airline, solar executives.
Why are people from those occupations interested in your program? It's a bit surprising to me.
Well, Delta has a carbon footprint. Delta purchases foods for flights. Delta has an opportunity to participate in a system that is better for the environment, that offsets carbon. That they have lots of interest in this type of this type of system. There's more emphasis and money now available to resilient food systems than ever. Lots of people who are interested in investing capital into replicating systems like ours. So there's banks and investors who have interest. Let's see who else. We've had some students from some Ivy League colleges or universities attend. Solar executives. We have a partnership with a solar farm to graze the land underneath their panels using sheep. So there are lots of different types of people. We all participate in the food production system. It doesn't matter what profession you are. On a personal or professional level, you have to take interest in food. And so we have not really I don't think we've scratched the surface on the types of people that should come to a CFAR session.
Okay, well, I would be fascinated to go, but I'm just curious, and I'm surprised. Are you saying then that organizations like Delta pay their staff to go do this and pay the cost?
That's right.
Okay. So
yeah, we actually sponsored the person from Delta who came, but I know that he had the support of his superiors.
Okay. Now, what have you seen any outcome from that? Do you see people going back and trying to make a case for buying your products and promoting this kind of farming?
I have conversations with the person who came from Delta probably every other week. And we have not, it has not manifested itself in purchasing, but I know that there's the potential for that to happen. And so I think that we're having far more conversations now than ever around how this food system can be replicated or be supported. Than we have ever before.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I have a lot of conversations because I do these shows several times a week. I try to have conversations about food systems and also health systems and the environment, global warming in particular. So I've had a number of shows with people who are agronomists, people teaching agriculture at a university like University of Guelph here near Toronto. And I would say that, by and large, the ones I've talked to spontaneously come up with ideas that they must have picked up from either you or somebody else, because it isn't a rare thing now for me to encounter people who actually would promote the kind of farming that you're doing. I'm very curious about how are you, for example, in touch with people teaching in agricultural colleges?
We are. There are almost every land grant university has an agricultural program, but a lot of that is rooted in commodity historical agricultural production. But there are lots of universities who have integrated alternative agricultural systems into their coursework. There are some colleges and universities that are geared for alternative production systems, like grass growing for livestock. So we do have relationships with universities and colleges, and we are excited to collaborate whenever we can.
Mm-hmm. What about the methane argument? Because when I talk to people in food research, mostly they tend to sort of understand your point of view. But when I talk to people who are primarily concerned about climate change, there's more sense of anxiety about the fact that ruminant animals produce so much methane, and that I'm not sure you got a handle on that. Do you? I mean, what is your answer to that? What's looked to me like a real problem?
Yeah, I think that the methane argument is absolutely there, but I also know that the earth evolved with lots and lots of ruminants. Far more ruminants that exist today existed thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago. I don't know how we were able to continue to develop a planet that's teeming with life with all those additional ruminants that existed hundreds of thousands of years ago, and today it's all of a sudden an issue. Now, do I believe that ruminants belch and fluctuate methane? Absolutely, the data's there. But do I believe that it is inflated due to unnatural diets and unnatural lifestyles? Yes, I do. And do I believe that animal impact, if managed responsibly in a regenerative, holistic way, can reverse these negatives that are associated with global warming and climate change? Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that fits something that has perplexed me, which is and
I don't mean to interrupt, but I've got time for one more question. I'm gonna have to run back over to the session here. I got to speak in just a few minutes, so let's do one more. And if you want to line up a second one, I'm happy to do that.
I see. Okay, well, look, just tell me where you think you need more answers yourself. What are the big challenges in promoting what you're doing? Are there any big questions in your mind about the value of what you're doing and whether there's additional research that might help solve those questions.
I think that nutritional testing is something that really needs some attention. I think that the nutrient density of food is less and less due to these degraded soils. I think that the carrots that we're growing today are less nutrient dense than they were 50 years ago. And I think the same is true for meat. So what I would love to see is additional research on the nutrient density of animals raised in natural production systems like ours versus the confined, industrialized, commoditized, and centralized production systems. I believe that the proof is in the pudding. And while I can speculate that the nutrient density of a piece of meat that was raised in an environment where they could express their instinctive behavior and foraged a natural diet is true and is superior compared to that was fed on a natural diet in a CAFO, which was stressful for the animal. I conceptually believe that, but I don't have any data to prove it. So I think that if we could get data that backed that up, or if it didn't, at least we would know. But I truly believe that animals raised with high welfare is not just an animal welfare issue. I believe it's additionally a nutritional issue as well.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Okay. Well, I don't want to hold you up because you've got important work to do today. And
it was great speaking with you, and I'm happy to take any additional questions from you at a later date.
Well, you know what I suggest? I'll be posting this on our website, tosavetheworld.ca, and we have a comments column for each show. So very likely you're going to get some people posting questions or comments there. Sometimes they say rude things and I take them down because they're abusive, but mostly they ask questions or they have objections that maybe you need to answer. So you're very welcome for, indefinitely, that's going to be there. You can add additional thoughts or reply to things that people post there. I want to encourage a discussion on that. Tosavetheworld.ca.
Well, please send me the link when it's live. I know I was going back and forth with Adam or Aaron. I can't remember who it was.
Adam, yes.
Yep.
And this is episode number 404. Great. So that's how people can find the show. It's been wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me.
Good wishes for your whole work, but also the show, the training that you're putting on today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Enjoyed it very much. Bye-bye. Project Save the World produces one of these shows 3 days a week and sometimes more. This is episode 404. You can watch them or listen to them as audio podcasts on our website, tosavetheworld.ca. Eventually, we even post the transcripts there. And when you get to the website, please look around because we have conversations going on there all the time about 6 global issues, plus potential reforms in governance, economics, and civil society. To find a particular talk show, enter its title or episode number in the search bar or the name of one of the guest speakers. After you've watched or listened, scroll down and share your thoughts about the show with the other viewers. This is a place for dialogue, so please join in. See you there.